Today on Catherine Learns Stuff, I'm going to walk you through how to make these 3D paper snowflakes. So let's jump in. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through using 3 different colors of paper, and I'm doing that on purpose so that you can see how we can fold our paper differently to maximize what we're using and sort of to change the shapes of our 3D stars, of our 3D snowflakes. So I'm going to try to keep everything organized. I'm going to try to go systematically through blue, purple, and yellow. Those aren't in order, but that's the way I'm going to try to keep the video organized so that every step will go blue, purple, yellow, so that you can see the different designs and techniques that we do through this. So hopefully this won't be too confusing, but I'm going to walk you through how to fold everything, cut it all out, and then make these beautiful snowflakes. I quickly want to go over the supplies that we need to make the 3D paper snowflakes. I've got 3 different types of paper that I'm going to use in this tutorial, and depending on how we fold them, we need anywhere between 9 and about 17 sheets. You can use fewer, and I'll show you how mine turned out and how I've changed them because I wasn't paying too much attention, but you will need a bunch of paper. I recommend a ruler, a paper cutter, and a scoring stylus, and then also you will need some glue. One thing that I did also use, I just used a piece of scrap cardstock for my stencils. I don't have that here, but that's the last thing that we'll need. Okay, so let's move over now and start to go over how we're folding our papers and what we're going to do to make these snowflakes. I'm starting off with my blue paper, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be cutting it lengthwise, and I want this to be cut at about 2.8 inches in width. So this will turn out to be 3 separate pieces. 2, 4, 6, 7. And I'm going to just, using my scoring stylus and my ruler, I'm going to score a line so that I know where to cut. 2, 4, 6, 7. And now I've got 3 sections, and I'm simply going to pull this through my paper cutter. Now it's okay if they're not exactly perfect in size because we're going to be measuring the folds so that they turn out nicely. And now that's going to give us 3 pieces of paper. And so what's going to happen next is that I'm going to, again using my pen and my scoring stylus, I'm going to measure out 2 lines, and I'm going to have my first line at about 0.8 inches, and then my next one is going to be about 1 1/8 of an inch. So that's going to be 2 lines here on this from the top and 2 lines from the bottom. Now I'm going to simply fold this. And I'm just going to run a bead of glue across the bottom here to hold this shut. And I've got my rib. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this, all of them is I'm going to fold this in half. So instead of having 1 rib, now I've got 2 ribs. So that's going to save me time later for cutting and gluing. For the purple paper, what I'm doing is I'm actually just going to be taking the 1 piece and folding it in half so that this can become 2 ribs of my snowflake. So I'm just going to cut this, fold this in half, and then use that as for my cut line. And then just quickly through my paper cutter. Now once I have my paper cut to the size that I want to be able to fold this into 3 pieces. So for this piece here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and have the outside at 1 inch on both sides and a 2-inch piece in the center. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this with my ruler here, and I'm going to measure this out on my table here, and then just score this through, and then 2, 4, and then like so, and that's the size that I want. And I'm going to quickly fold this along my score line. And that's then complete. And now all I need to do is glue this piece together along this spot right here. And my purple is completed. For my yellow piece of paper, I'm actually going to be cutting this in a different direction than the other pages. And I'm going to cut this one sort of this way as opposed to this way. This will make a smaller snowflake, but it will also allow me to have sort of a bit thicker pieces. And I want to be cutting these out at about 3.6 inches each. They don't need to all be perfect. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, that's not very right. 4, 6, 8. Okay, and that's ready there. And I'm going to, again, just cut this with my paper cutter. Now, similar to with the other pages, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure off my size here. And for this one, when I'm cutting this, I want my outside pieces to be about 0.9 inches and my inside is going to be about 1 3/4. Again, just folding on the score lines. And that's ready to go. Could have made this one a little bit thicker maybe, but it's good enough. Again, gluing it and then folding it in half. Now that we've got our papers cut and folded, we need to do the same thing to get a whole bunch of these. So with the blue, I ended up using 16 sheets of paper, but you can get away with 11. I'll show you how I did that. So you need 11 sheets of these. If you're doing purple, the sizes for purple, you can get away with 8 pieces of paper for this to cut and fold. And with yellow, you'll need 7 pieces of paper for that. And I used a bit more in mine because I wasn't paying attention, and I'll show you how I did those and then how you can fix them if you have made too many. For each color of paper that I've cut out, I'm going to create a template so that I'll be able to draw on a design onto each one. So for the blue color, what I've done is I've cut out a piece of cardstock that's the same size as one of the blue folded ribs, and that is 1 1/8 inch by 5.5 inches in size. And all I'm going to do is with my pen and a ruler just draw on some triangles and rectangles and lines and just things that are easy to cut. I want to point out though, when I did this, I actually made my templates very complicated, and this resulted in a lot more time cutting, but you can actually make the templates very simple with just 1 or 2 cuts in it to make a beautiful snowflake as well. Once I've got my blue template finished, I'm going to cut it out and then I'm going to trace on the template onto one side of each of the ribs. And what I've done is I've actually added in a little marker at the bottom of my template, labeling it FB for front bottom, so that I know to always place it on the front bottom of each rib so that each piece gets cut out the same way. Once all of my pieces are traced out, then I'm going to cut them out just the same way that I cut out the template. The next template that I've got is the purple template, and the size for that is 2 inches by 5.5 inches. And I do the same process for the purple as I did for the blue, except I just have a different design on the purple. And again, I'm going to point out that the more complicated the design, the longer it's going to take to cut, and the more complicated your snowflake will look. Finally, with the yellow paper, my template is a size of 1 3/4 inch by 4 1/4 inch. Now, if you are using different paper or you've created a different size to cut out your snowflake with, you'll need to make sure that the template that you use is the same size as your ribs of your snowflake. So that can change depending on what you're doing, but the sizes of paper that I've used, these will be the templates that we need. So I'm going to quickly cut out all of my papers for the blue, the purple, and the yellow, and then we're going to start to assemble this. All right, so now that we've got all of our pieces cut out, the fun begins. We are going to start by gluing all of these together. So when we initially made the designs, we've listed them all with a FB on the bottom so that we know which way our ribs are supposed to be facing. So we want to make sure that they're lined up. I find that this is helpful to make the assembly go faster. Then the next thing that we want to do is we're going to start to glue the insides of the ribs together so that the fold of each piece is glued together. And I'm going to do this systematically one piece at a time. So I'm going to glue the rib to itself, but only the middle piece in between the fold. And then I'm going to grab the next piece and glue it on top. And I'm going to do this all the way until I've used up all of my pieces of paper. Now, when I initially started this out, I didn't know how many I needed. I did some research online and everyone said 12 was the magic number. 12 is not the magic number, at least not with this size. So I ended up using 16 pieces of paper and each paper had 3. That's how I did this. So I did the same concept with the purple. And again, I just had to cut out a whole bunch of purple pieces that I needed, not knowing how many I wanted. And I just kept gluing them all together. So I ended up using 11 sheets of paper. So 22 sets of ribs for the purple. And then I did the same thing for the yellow as well. And the yellow, I used 11 sheets of paper, but I could have gotten away with 7. Once everything is glued together for the middle part and the one piece to the next, it's going to be time to start to glue this together. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, this part's really tricky. I found that when I tried to pull them together, the whole thing would fly out of my hands and sort of fly across the room. So I found that using a pencil in each rib to sort of help hold them together helped. Also, what I found was since I had a lot of surplus ribs in my snowflakes, it gave me the ability to hold on to the snowflake better and squish it together better. All I did was apply a bead of glue along the center of the rib and I pulled the first and last pieces together and tried to hold them in place. For most of these, for the blue, the purple, and the yellow, they flew across the room when I tried to do it the first time. It probably took me 6 or 7 tries to get them to glue together properly. So just keep that in mind. The last gluing is not as simple as it seems. Alright, so it's time to go over some tips and tricks that I learned while making these 3D paper snowflakes. The one thing that I did in this video is I've made all of my snowflakes the same size, so all of the ribs for each snowflake are the same. But you can actually change the size when you are making these. So I did similar snowflakes, but I did it with a 12 by 12 piece of cardstock, and instead of folding the ribs in half, I folded it so that one side was 7 inches and one side was 5 inches. This gave the snowflake a bit more of an up and down look, so maybe more like a star. So that's something else that you can do with those as well. You can also do several big ones and several small ones just to give the snowflake a different shape and different sizes and different appearances. So another thing that I talked about in my video is that when I was making these, I wasn't really sure how many ribs I needed to make my snowflakes look perfect. And so I just sort of cut out a whole lot of ribs and then I glued them all together and then I glued my snowflake together. But after the fact, I realized that there was probably way too many. So what you can do if you come up to this problem is that if you have it already glued together and you realize that there's too much, you can cut a few of them out. So simply just pulling the ribs closer together to see how many you actually need. When you're pulling the ribs together to see how many you can actually remove, just pay attention to how the snowflake is reacting. If it starts to fold in on itself and turn into a cone, that means you're pulling out too many of the ribs and you won't be able to glue this back together. Also, one thing that I found with this project is that I've done this for Christmas, but you can use these for birthday parties or any other sort of event you have, just by changing the colors that you use. And there you have it. Your 3D paper snowflakes are complete. So I hope you've enjoyed this craft. If you have any questions or comments or any suggestions on how to make this better, please let me know. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.